So for this session, I'm sorry, y'all. I'm still a little discombobulated, trying to keep everything on track. As y'all notice, we're a little understaffed this time around, right, Rebecca?
What happened?
We're a little understaffed this time around.
Yeah.
Okay. But what we want to do today is just kind of give an update on where we are with the coalition. And
Could you say a little bit about the history of the coalition?
yeah. So hey, come on. So yeah, let me just turn this around. So basically, we had the 2012, the first annual Environmental Justice, Environmental Health Disparities Symposium in Maryland, D.C., and was basically an event to start a discussion about environmental justice, environmental health disparities in the region. There have been national meetings on environmental justice, and probably environmental justice that have been held at Howard University, and other meetings that I think that were sponsored by the Department of Energy, but no meetings that really focused on EJ issues in the region, and really no meetings that really connected these issues to health disparities. So that's the difference. So you're talking about environmental justice, you have the legal part, the social part, these other aspects, but the driving force for our vision was to really bring in health and health disparities, because it will help situate the School of Public Health to be a resource, right? And also be an opportunity to really show that there are major connections between environmental injustice. And from a scientific perspective, really what it's about is how certain communities are differentially burdened by hazards, as you know, but it's the intersection of environmental and social determinants of health and health disparities. So it was a reframing, to really frame it that way, and allow us to bring in more of the science and the data, and also the social movement to have, see what were the missing links within the region. And so out of that meeting, one of the workshops we had, the discussions we had, and it was only a one-day event. This is a two-day event. The second annual one was a two-day event too. But it wasn't here. It was actually at GW and Gallaudet. It was focused on climate justice. So this is our third one. So we focused on climate justice last year. But coming out of the event, we had a session on the DMV development of a regional network to address environmental justice. And so we had participants who included groups from, who were some of the groups we had, Rebecca? We had Legal Conservation Voters, Anti-Conscious Water Society was part of the discussion, Legal Conservation Voters. We also had, I think, Andy, were you part of that first discussion in 2012 about creating a DMV EJ coalition? I'm trying to remember who the players.
Yeah, I was not actually
at that meeting. So, but out of that meeting, we decided to have a series of conference calls to talk about. I know Rebecca Ruggles with the Maryland Environmental Health Network was part of that discussion. A series of conference calls to think about, okay, say it again? Yeah, EIP was a part of that discussion. Environmental Integrity Project was part of the discussion, and there were a few other groups. So we had a series of conference calls beginning in spring of 2013, and that discussion occurred over a period, I think, of about 9 to 10 months, where we had conference calls. We had an in-person meeting at the Sierra Club office hosted by We Act for Environmental Justice. We also had a meeting in Prince George's County, and we eventually had a meeting in Turner Station community in Dundalk in Baltimore County. And so over this year, we talked about the vision and mission of the DMV EJ Coalition, and unfortunately, I was going to write those things down. My laptop died on me, but maybe we have internet access. I can write them. But our overall mission was really focused on trying to bring together partners and groups to advocate for environmental justice in the region. But really, we had some language about engaging communities more. So the issue has been with the coalition. We have this mission and vision statement. We've had a series of conference calls. We went through a process of sort of issue prioritization. So some of the issues that we talked about were whether or not we should do more direct sort of advocacy with the legislature, in Maryland, and also working with town officials in D.C. So that was one thing we talked about. We need to educate them. So maybe for some of us, doing advocacy is not what we can do, but we can educate the legislators. We also talked about, what were some of the issues that we should look at. So we talked about looking at air pollution issues, et cetera. But one of the big issues that came out of the discussion was the Chesapeake Bay. And we thought it was very important to focus on Chesapeake Bay because there's so many resources invested in Chesapeake Bay, but a lot of those resources and advocacy has been around really the ecological health of the Bay and not connecting the human health, people, underserved folks. So this event that we have this last 2 days actually really comes out in response to the need to reframe the Chesapeake Bay discussion. So it's not just the restoring the Bay itself, it's also issues within the Bay. So you have a geographic focus, right? So you can still look at air pollution issues, incinerators, things that may not be directly, well, they are all directly Bay related, but there are things that are more like really directly Bay related. You know, fishing, recreation, discharges, stormwater, and then climate change, of course, was a constant theme across what we've looked at as a coalition. And one of the things that what we try to do with the rotation of the meetings, we wanted to be in DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia, EJ coalition. We primarily have focused on Maryland issues. And part of the reason why is many of our constituent members of this loose coalition are based in Maryland. Many of the issues that are more EJ related in Virginia are not in Northern Virginia. They're not proximal. So, and then the community partners are not in place to really engage. So it's been hard to engage the Virginia side. And we've had some engagement with DC, but most of the work's been focused on Maryland. But we want to be more expansive, right? So that's been one of the challenges of really trying to have better coverage of EJ issues in the region. And another major challenge is we're primarily advocates. We're not activists. We're not community groups. So many of the folks who are the impacted population concerned are not actively involved, engaged in the DMV EJ coalition. So the whole point with the coalition was to engage communities. But part of the problem is it's hard to engage communities in this region on EJ issues. Okay?
Can we talk about that?
Yeah.
Maybe not right now, but.
Well, so you want to, can someone like, well, let me do it myself. That's why I had Laura put these in here. Yeah, you can help. Please help me. You can help me. Please. I know you've done this before with me. Thank you.
I thought I graduated.
I know you never graduated. You always be my mentee.
That's true.
Yeah, she is my mentee, by the way. So say that question again.
And we can just put a pin in this. We don't have to.
Yeah, we'll come back to it
right now. But why is it so challenging to engage with communities
on EJ
that
issues?
Are facing EJ issues and concerns in Maryland?
Is that a font tip one?
We'll make it work.
Okay. So that's been one of the challenges, and then another challenge is, a sister challenge to that is the fact that we're primarily advocacy organizations. And many advocacy organizations are primarily environmental advocacy organizations. Okay, so some of our constituent members include CCAN, right? Clean Water Action, Maryland Legal Conservation Voters,
Sierra Club,
Maryland Sierra Club, Environmental Integrity Project. Who are the other?
University of Maryland. Right?
University of Maryland Law Clinic. I'll get to the work. No, that's true. University of Maryland Law Clinic. Who are my, University of Maryland School of Public Health, the SIEGE program.
Oh, EHN, right?
Yeah, Maryland Environmental Health Network is one of our primary partners. And so besides that, you've had some engagement. If you look at your sponsors, the advisory committee list, many of those advisory committee members, the planning committee members for this event, they've also been engaged in some way, had some contact with the coalition. So a lot of our, planning committee members are people who've been, who know about the coalition, have been affiliated with the coalition. Okay, so you have that. So we have some challenges, and I think we need a lot more engagement. Another challenge is this is a leveraging effort. There's no funding for this initiative. So part of the problem has been, since we're all leveraging percent effort and time and resources, it's not as structured as we would like it to be, right? And that's also one reason why, because of lack of funding, why we haven't really worked on DC or worked on Virginia. Because we had the funding, we could do that engagement work of those communities in a better way in DC and also Virginia. Okay? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Before you got to the last field, you commented that you're an advocate, not an activist.
Yes.
How do you make the distinction?
For me, an advocate is someone who basically is not a member of that impact community. So for me, an activist is someone who's more in a community-based organization, a CDC, a faith-based group that's more directly engaged, more proximal, lives in the community. So when I go home, I go back to Bowie. I don't go back to Ward 8. I don't go back to South Baltimore. I don't go back to Dundalk. I don't go back to Somerset County. I don't go back to Sheriff Road. I go back to Bowie, which has none of these issues, right? That we're talking about. Okay. So as I saw your head shake.
Air goes everywhere.
Air goes everywhere. Of course, air parcels in the watershed, but
And Frederick said we have some challenges with the Patuxent.
we have some major challenges with the Patuxent because it's a split on the Patuxent.
But your bigger point is absolutely right.
Yeah, so that's for me as an advocate. As an activist, I'm more grounded in the work. And in a lot of cases, activists are people who live in the community. So you can say activist / community leader, right? Where I'm more of an advocate. I have a lot of, and a positive spin on that, I have a lot of access to infrastructure and resources where I come in and provide technical assistance. But again, that can be a resource. So many of us who are part of the DMV EJ coalition, so in so many ways it's a good thing. We are resources. And so many of our listening sessions that we've done, we've actually gone and had these meetings where we talk about how can we help. And so in that way, we've been able to collaborate, help build partnerships, and provide more input and technical assistance to those communities. But again, this is an unfunded mandate. Well, not unfunded mandate. It's not No Child Left Behind. But you know what I'm saying? We don't have funding. So it makes it a little organic, not as structured, and not as, I think, responsive as we would like to be. Okay? But one very positive aspect of what we've done through the leveraging percent effort and people's time has been, and also because of their interest too. We do what we're interested in, right? Like I said before. We have a DMV legislative work group, okay? So we have a DMV EJ coalition legislative work group that's been very involved in understanding what are some of the gaps in laws related to environmental justice, environmental health disparities, and this work group is primarily focused on Maryland. So we went through a process of kind of thinking about what are some of the relevant laws or regulations where we can fill a gap. We talked about NEPA as a potential point of entry because NEPA does not include health impact assessments, which is a big issue. We talked about stakeholder engagement as it relates to, what would we say? Was RECRA? Was it RECRA? Which one is it we talked about? Matt. RECRA? EPCRA? No, I'm talking about the laws. So some of the spaces talk community right to know. So we talked about there's some gaps in community right to know where there's some opportunities for us to do some modifications as it relates to EJ.
So there must have been EPCRA.
Yeah, so EPCRA. And we also talked about the biggest thing that we talked about is part of our sort of output and outcomes and the way we can have an impact. Last year, state of Maryland, there was a cumulative impacts bill. And the idea of that cumulative impacts bill was to address the cumulative impacts of environmental hazards in certain communities. And the idea is that if you have crossed a certain threshold, you have to go through some additional steps to get a permit in areas where we have these cumulative burdens. And so that bill did not pass. Part of the problem with the bill, it had no health in it. And why, in many cases, why do people talk about environmental injustice? You're talking about health, right? And so we went through a process, we've been going through a process of revising that bill. I don't know if I should go into too many details. What do you think I should do?
I probably just for the sake of time. I'll keep it pretty basic. Okay,
so we're in the process of revising that bill. He doesn't want me to say too much. Revising that bill. I'm gonna talk
because we're still in the process.
We're still in the process. I know we're in the process, but we want to be transparent as much as possible. So we're trying to add health to the bill. We're also trying to figure out ways to come up with the metrics to understand what the demographics should be for that threshold, for the EJ threshold. And so that's been one of our biggest sort of process. Is it hot in here, y'all?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was hot. We were in here yesterday.
It was hot. It was hot. Okay, this is.
Also, the cumulative for the cumulative impacts bill. The other thing is we narrowed the scope so that it's only air permits now.
Yeah.
So it makes it a little bit more tangible, I think, for people trying to. If you're just saying the permitting process,
yeah,
it's just for
facilities trying to get air pollution permits.
So it narrows the scope of the bill so that it's more lawmakers and agencies find it more palatable.
Yep. So that's basically where we are with the coalition. So we're loose coalition. We have membership across the DMV, primarily Maryland, and most of the issues have been focused on primarily Maryland issues because of our constituents' interests and the constituents who are a member of the coalition. We need to really come up with a new mission statement, a new vision. Part of our vision, and this gets back to the point, I want to belabor this point. That's what it says. So we talked about we, people of color, want to make sure we address environmental justice in the region. That's in the current vision. Part of it gets to this sort of this tension and conflict, right? That we talked about, like who can do EJ work, but it also talks about historical issues. So it wasn't to say that other people couldn't collaborate. It's that we need to have people of color, because many of these issues are in people of color communities. Okay, so but that language needs to be modified. So that vision needs to be modified. And so I think what's also important is we need to figure out, part of the session is what are the strategies that we can implement to grow the coalition? Who needs to be a part of the coalition? How can, as Bernice said, how can we better engage communities that are impacted by environmental injustice and environmental health disparities? What are the funding opportunities? What resources are out there? And so what I want to be able to do, I have sticky notes. I hope everybody has a pen. And what I want you to do before y'all fall out, and I have to call the emergency services because it is really hot in there.
Like this pen is very.
You're the only one who's really hot.
Huh?
You're the only one who's really hot.
It's not bad.
Really?
Yes.
My head is on fire.
I'm standing under it.
Oh, is that? Okay, so thank you. Like, why is like an egg? See, that's a good. Because I had no one like, why is my? Okay, thank you. And I'm tired. Like, I'm going crazy. Like, this phone in the mouth. Okay. Yeah. So what I want to do first is take. I want you to make this participatory. So I want us to go through a process where you kind of write down ideas and we can kind of list them out and then prioritize what should be the issues that we address, right? Who are the partners that we need to connect to, and what and what are the resources we should be trying to get at? Okay, we'll go ahead.
So question. So you narrowed it to be areas to kind of get the legislation through and passed. So when it's treated. Do you envision then, once you have a win, expanding it back to do more expansive things? Yeah, so part of the idea was, so when you think about, we're thinking about what are the gaps and what are the opportunities for action. So this bill, because it went through the process once and we know what health is missing, and one thing I forgot to say is, we're trying to also leverage the Maryland Health Improvement, Maryland Health Disparities Reduction Act. Okay. Because you have the health enterprise zones in that act, and you have all the metrics in that, a lot of those metrics, but that act had no environment in it. It had no health, it had really very little social justice in it. I guess I'm on the Baltimore one. We lobbied. It was supposed to be a health empowerment zone. Yeah. It became a health enterprise zone. It became more healthcare and doctors and the conducive staff on the medical side. Subsidy. Yeah, exactly. It's not. But the metrics were good. So we wanted to leverage health disparities as a baseline. So that'd be part of helping you figure out where you shouldn't put additional facilities. Right. The second question I had is, so I heard you saying you want a diverse and inclusive and collaborative, but not race neutral, right? So the vision statement that I don't have up on the board. The way it's written, it says we people of color, like the only people who are part of the coalition are people of color. Yeah, but most of us are not people of color in the coalition. Right. Right? Isn't that right?
Well, pink's a color.
Right? Okay, so are non-white, are non-pink. Most of the folks are not non-whites. Okay, you got me. Are not non-whites. So part of the issue is we want to diversify, be more inclusive, but part of our problem is it's been hard to engage. So it's not just the advocacy partners that the issue is. The community part is real. We have very little community participation in the coalition. Besides the Free Your Voice group in Baltimore, and also Dundalk, the turn station and conservation teams. Besides that, we've had limited Sheriff Road, but I mean, as they participated, we've gone to them, but they haven't participated in the coalition, right? So, so I don't do this now, but I chose this one versus the other one because I could be proactive here. I would have to raise hell there. We wrote the health impact assessment grant to bring it to Baltimore City, to build the capacity of community, which would have addressed that. And we were organizationally raped, and it was stolen from us. They have to pay it back. It never got to community, so I don't know what they talk about over there. But I'm literally in the CDC grant. It's illegal, you can't do it. So we have to talk about these structural issues so that when people actually do this work, that when it becomes politically unpalatable, they don't run and hide. And
Right, and so it destroyed the entire purpose of writing the grant, which was to build community capacity, to make it. So there's a reason that you don't have participation.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. You go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to ask, you mentioned what are the opportunities coming up. It sounds like that's something you'd like feedback on, right, from us. And what occurs to me is DC.
Yeah, I want you going to say it?
Well, yeah, if I could just mention real quick.
Okay.
I mean, DC is about to have a new mayor, right?
Yeah.
And some new council members. And Maryland is also going to have a new governor. And sadly, that governor is probably not the most prone to be thinking about what we're talking about in this room. I would think. I don't know.
I don't think Anthony Brown was either, because that's why he
lost. That's fair. That's fair. But I'm just saying, I
Totally
think
fair.
in terms of getting traction with what we do to help recruit and facilitate communication with community groups, it just seems to me like DC might be an opportunity as well. I know we don't have as many groups there maybe, but...
Well, we have some, so there are some community-based organizations that have been participating in this event. So you have Empower DC, which is working on the obvious city situation. You have, Energy Justice, Mike's group has done some work with, so some of the community leaders, like, does Mike work with you a little bit? No, Mike works with Miss...
Janet works with them.
Janet works with, Janet and Michelle, Mike works with Michelle. So you have Michelle, so we have a few groups we can connect to more now that they were at this event. And there's Michelle right there. Go ahead.
You also have 1/3 of the General Assembly being new people. Mm-hmm. And I see that as an opportunity as well. There's going to be, I think, 40 or 50 new delegates that have never been there before, who are very eager probably to learn about stuff. And if we can get to them first, then maybe they can understand us better.
No, well, that gets back to one of the statements I made earlier about what is the best way to improve sort of the opportunities for advocacy around environmental justice. We talked about educating the policymakers, right? So as I said earlier, no politician goes to politician school. It's our job to educate them.
And my point about my trauma was we need to educate funders, because they have no idea what's going on.
Okay.
When it rolls out, the theory. We're part of the highest level of policymaking and theory nationally. But when it comes to how it hits the ground, I don't care when you're talking about the Opportunity Collaborative, which is sustainability for HUD, whether you're talking about choice or promise, or whether you're talking about any of these grants, it is not, it becomes bastardized because the gatekeepers do what they do. And we have to organize around that, including the funders who don't know what's going on.
So, that's a really good point. So I mentioned, I don't know right where, sheepishly, sort of our funding partners and how I said some of the funding partners have never funded this. So I was glad that they did fund this, right? I don't think many of them were here, the funders. I mean, so it was great that you fund us, but it would be great for you to be here to hear what we talked about, right? So, but we're supposed to have a foundation follow-up. So Town Creek provide some funding for this event. So the idea is to have a foundation follow-up, so community Chesapeake Bay funders. So Town Creek, Campbell, some of the other ones that CBT, the usual suspects, to talk to them about how they can fund more of this work. So we're going to report back to them and then really engage and hopefully challenge them to again to provide more funding for these issues, and again to do more funding where it's the integration of the ecological and human. And not just for the foundation, but also environmental groups. Not always say, well, that's mission creep. No, that's not mission creep. That means your mission is too narrow, and you're only doing what you know. So that's something I want y'all to remember. When it comes to these issues, we do what we know. It's everything we do. We do what we know. And so if you know more diverse things, you can do more diverse. You can be more holistic. If you do something that's more narrow, you can do what's more narrow. There's nothing wrong with that. We have to recognize it, and don't assume that you can automatically solve a problem just because you have a certain skill set. You have to recognize what skills and knowledge you don't have, and then who you need. Diversity comes in. It's not about numbers. It's about who has perspectives that you can leverage to fill in that gap. Okay? Well, go ahead.
So the Maryland Commission on Environmental Justice and Sustainable Communities also has been challenged, at least for the 10 years that I've been on the commission, and Andy has been on longer than I have, with getting EJ groups or impacted communities to engage and to be able to sustain their engagement with the commission. So we faced that challenge as well, and so I put that up there as a real genuine question. why is it so challenging to engage with the communities that are most affected by these issues and keep them at the table? And, you know, one obvious answer to that is that people are not resourced, but people are also not resourced to even build community-based organizations. So the folks who step in, right, to respond to the RFPs or whatever the coalitional opportunity might be, are not necessarily the people who are most directly affected by these issues. And that is sort of across the circle. So my question is, what do we need to do to better engage with the folks who are truly on the front lines and feeling the impacts most directly, to lift them up and build their capacity so that they can be driving the train?
Part of my lifting that up is that we have this phenomenon in Baltimore because, and I would say that the academy is business, and the business is to helicopter in and to fix you, and you know, not everybody has that obviously.
You're making good points.
As an industry, and so those with the best resources, even when we write the grants and are innovative and ahead, we still don't have the bandwidth to fight off what naturally happens in the system, which is to close ranks around what's politically feasible. When you were in a room when we released a report, and we had every environmental justice focus.
What was the report about?
It was the Raven Group stuff, the band.
Yeah.
And I don't know what your experience was, but it was really interesting because all 4 black faces we brought in the room. And we said, look, this is a report nationally in 13 cities. And by the way, you're doing great things here in Baltimore, but you've got some ways to go. My read was people were offended, as if to say, and because they're all good people, but structurally, somehow, and I know all the people, they're all good people, but structurally somehow it wasn't a priority to make sure that the capacity was built in a way that had real power, not a Noah's Ark 2x2, I got two elephants, 2 giraffes, check that box, keep it moving, but you really don't have no money and no power. But you know, so that is the rub right there.
Well, what you just said, and I want to get to some of these. But you just said it. So you mentioned academia, and just mentioned it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. We do the. I mean, I'm not saying but I'm part of a system. We go through a similar process. Yeah. Once we get figured out that if someone can take away our resources, our power, or send it, and we get defensive in a different way, academics do, and we do this, it's the same process. So again, it gets back to what you know. Again, I'm saying what we know, it drives our culture, it drives our institutions, and it drives our systems. That to me, that's a connected dots. And it's very basic. And what we know in many cases, it's not a bad thing. I mean, stereotypes, biases, assumptions. I have stereotypes, biases, assumptions I have to deal with all the time as an individual. I have my own lens. And some issue that you may think is important, I'm not going to say this is important because my lens means I came from a community where EJ was important. So my stuff is going to be on these issues. Other issues may be important to me, but I've seen this more, again, tertiary, coordinary, what comes out the coordinary. Right? So that's what, I think we all do that. And there's nothing wrong with that, but if you want to build a broader movement, you got to bring in people who their issue is this different issue, and then connect the dots. Be the bridge.
Well,
yeah, that's ma'am. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's a project going on in Prince George's County, and it's yet to be proven, but I think it is trying a different model. Adam Ortiz, who's the head of the sustainability department, he has this thing that's called like the environmental
sustainability council. He has community. Not that group?
It's called like ECAP or something, but when you go, there's almost no one in the room that knows anything about the environment. They were all invited there because they're representatives of their community.
Yeah, I've been to the meetings.
Civic groups and so forth. So I think what the idea is to bring in the people who have power in their own communities and educate them about the environment rather than the other way around. Like when I first walked in, it's like, well, what happened to, there's no one here from the Sierra Club, there's no one here from Seacon. It's like, yes, that's right, there's actually citizens here. And so, and it's mostly citizens of color. And so I think it's going to take over time. I mean, there's always pizza, there's always fellowship
they have food.
And food, right? And so I think over time, that's the long-range plan.
Every 4th Wednesday and 3rd Wednesday of the month.
Right. Yep. So I think this is a really interesting model that I was trying to see if he can actually get the citizens to decide what the direction that they want and to get the buy-in because they're making the choices about that.
So let me connect the dots, right? So after that meeting where Kaiser would say, look, we have redefined resiliency because the literature is thin. And we're redefining it based on communities of color. They spent a year convincing. And so now communities of color led EJ was supposed to put a grant for it. You know who put it in? The city health department. So it's really about changing the dynamic, because it's like, you can't get, you're the health department. This is for community-based groups. And yet the natural inclination is still to think about, so how do you build the power of groups that don't have capacity yet, that don't have, but that are most effective? That's a totally different model.
Yeah. So the power for me is there. Is the access and resources to actualize the power.
Yeah.
Let me go you first, and I'll come back. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, what we're doing on the CAG is we found out that the new mayor, Marion Bowser, has put together a list of committees in all the wards to let her know what the community is interested in.
Is that the same as the ANC?
No, ANC is a person that's elected. This is something the mayor has put together, a preliminary group of people that she trusts in different wards to let her know these people have nothing to do with ANC.
Mm-hmm.
So they have created a group, a committee, and they're going to report back to her what's important in the committee in the sections as a whole. So I say that to say this group is on the DC website. I don't know the name of it, but what we're doing is one of our lead people. We're going through that list, and they're finding where can the CAD go and try to make contact with those people.
Yeah.
And for people that's in Maryland that have a new governor, he might not be interested in your agenda, but he's interested in the county's agenda as a whole. So you might want to find out where that is for the state of Maryland and contact those people. And if you're interested in DC, I can get that contact information and share it with you.
Okay, thank you.
Well, both of them have transition websites. And
Yeah.
you go on the website and volunteer to inform in specific domains. So like environmentalism, healthcare, education, whatever. So you can just go to just Google their name and transition, and you'll find their website where you can go out and make yourself available. If you
And let's put that down as a point of the utility of that and how to make that really work. Because that's a good way to input. But then, and I know this, I want to come back to it after I get your comments. I think that's a good point.
My name's Jody Rose. I'm with Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake. And so our approach is very not bureaucratic at all. It's very time consuming, but we're working directly with congregations. So we're really in the trenches, and our role is to broker those connections to the grant resources. Interestingly, this most recent round of CBT grants that went in, I don't know if anybody was
I've never gotten
in that pool in the last, those deadlines were Thursday and Friday. We applied, but we were also competing with like 5 of our churches who we helped apply.
Which is a good thing.
So it is a wonderful thing. It's an unusual position to be in, but that's the way we want to be. We want, so I think that it's going to take time, but I think that, I guess we would fall into that category of, we're working directly with the activists. In fact, in Prince George's County, there's quite a few that we were doing some work with there. They've got a great program for their stormwater. And something came up this past week that got Adam a little bit concerned. And who did he pull together to advise him? It wasn't his, informational officers and that, although they were on the call. It was myself, it was Reverend Thomas, it was, so I do think that when we are in the trenches and we have boots on the ground, which is a very, we're a very small organization, it's me and 2 part-time people, and we're trying to do a lot, but that's, we're really, I'll be speaking next, there's quite a movement building, and I think, the faith community, they're there. You don't have to convince them. You just need to help them get over some of those barriers.
So I have a quick question, 2 questions to you. So getting back to the session we had this morning about faith community and the disconnect between ecological health and human health and justice.
And I wasn't there, but my part-time person was.
So that was part of that saying, like, where are people
what's
actually?
Your question?
So where are people actually? So let me step back a little bit more. So I did a historical summary of faith community and the EJ movement, which is long-term. King, long-term. Drivers of the EJ movement. Then I brought it back to Chesapeake Bay Area and what the faith community is actually doing, and the disconnect between the social justice and the ecological. So is that disconnect, is that perception wrong based on the evidence that I've seen, or is that disconnect actually there?
So the disconnect is there, but that is exactly where IPC operates.
Okay.
Is to try and connect those dots. And
Okay.
I'll tell a story about a gentleman at a mega church in Prince George's County that we worked with over the past several months,
Okay.
who was really only in the room because he's staff and somebody forced him to be in the room. The transformation that takes place when you connect those dots. So no, I completely agree that that is not a natural understanding that people of faith have.
But the social justice stuff
Once
is
you-
part of faith. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, how did they go from, why is it here, the justice, faith, dealing with poor, that's a natural, but here, what we've seen, the partners, it hasn't been natural. There's been a disconnect. So that's naturally for folks of faith. So that was part of the discussion this morning. Like, why is that disconnect here, where in other places, or historically, it's been central?
You mean here as in Maryland?
In the Bay Area. I mean, as it relates
Chesapeake Bay Area.
Chesapeake Bay Area.
Because we're a Southern Mason-Dixon line.
No, that doesn't.
Well, I don't really know what disconnect. So
I'm talking
going to tell you
I'm
what
talking
we
between the
operate in.
ecological and social justice and human health. So what was I was saying before, the EJ movement overall, which has been, as Fred said yesterday, has been put on the side, even though as I tried, and I didn't do a good job, but I said this morning, if I would have put the 17 principles of environmental justice, people would have seen it's a holistic movement, should be at the core. But the point is, why is there, just the question is, why has there been that disconnect between the ecological, human health, and social justice from the faith community in this region? Oh, so I'll go to some other folks. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
There's an exception in Howard County. In Howard County, the Industrial Areas Foundation group had organized the faith community to support stormwater management jobs for youth. And so they really got the churches involved in that.
So we have these go ahead.
I think it depends on the context. I work in the transportation industry, and so I'm an EJ practitioner in addition to being an engineer and planner. And historically in this area, there has been a separation, and I think a lot of it is because, and Bernice, you can jump in and correct me, everything is so politicized that they create silos of separation of church and state.
Oh,
and so even on some of our projects where we have faith-based initiatives to include the faith-based community and outreach and advocacy and leadership for community, some of our clients they will push back and say, well, we don't really feel comfortable reaching out to ministers and churches, and we don't feel comfortable, and so we have to come back and say historically in most communities, it is the faith-based community that has direct connection to poor, marginalized, and underserved populations. And so for projects that I am on specifically, I will always go to task to make sure that there's a bridge. Some people don't feel comfortable in that. And I also find too, and this is my personal feeling, so please don't hold it against me professionally.
Yeah, you're fine.
My personal opinion is when you live in a very liberal environment too, I work often on a lot of projects with atheists or people that try to disconnect faith from everything that has to do with their professional career or how they even analytically approach a problem, which is much different than when you talk about grassroots, groundswell type of movements, which generally are faith-based in your interpersonal beliefs and foundational beliefs of how you function in society as a human being.
That's a powerful point.
Yeah.
That's a very powerful, deep point. Let me go here.
Well, I just wanted to take a step back from the conversation and make sure that we all have that the conversation has a focus that we're all clear on. So if the goal of the conversation is to come up with a mission for the coalition, then it seems like what we're talking about now isn't exactly serving that purpose.
Yeah, I'm gonna get y'all back to issues, challenges, partners and resources. That's why I gave y'all the sticky pads. But thank you for that. Let me go to Bernice.
So, but I want to disagree slightly with that, because I think where we have a challenge is that we're all not operating from the same plane, right? We're not operating on the same page, and so environmental justice for many folks has become a catchphrase for how to deal with or how to reach a population that otherwise is not in the room with us when we're having most of the environmental and sustainability conversations that we have in our region and in our state. But the folks who are there, like somebody mentioned that there's outreach to folks in Prince George's County now by Adam Ortiz and the Maryland Department of Sustainability, the Prince George's Department of Sustainability and the Environment, that is bringing in people who are not really steeped in environmental issues. And I would sort of throw that on its head and say, people approach these issues from a variety of vantage points, right? They may not talk about climate change or rising tides, but they sure are going to talk about persistent flooding that they have experienced for decades in their communities. And they're talking about the same issues that you're talking about, but they're talking about them from a different perspective. That doesn't mean they're any less well-versed. That doesn't mean their environmental literacy is non-existent. We tend to talk about the folks who are not in the room with us on a regular basis as if they are absent of information, right? And absence of an understanding. Their understanding is different.
It's even deeper than that.
When we use the word
community, when we use the word community,
I'm going
that
there.
too.
I'm going there. So there's also a fundamental disconnect that folks who know they're operating in an environmental justice paradigm and framework are also, by definition, dealing with issues of racial discrimination, of class discrimination, of the history of residential segregation in our state and in our region, which is why so many people live in the places that they live in that are vulnerable, either ecologically or industrially, right? This is not an accident. And so folks want to first know that we're all having a conversation and that you recognize that this is not an accident. That people didn't just get up and decide to live in places where they were vulnerable. That's not how they got there. So in order to unpack that stuff and figure out what's our trajectory going forward, that's got to be different than the stuff that we've done in the past, because the stuff that we've done in the past has failed us all, right? We've done some elemental improvements in the Bay, but not the kind of quantum improvements given all the federal money that's being spent on this and our tax dollars. We should be a lot further along, right? One of the reasons that we're not, because the conversation is not connected to communities and not connected to people who are sort of at the front lines of where the impacts are, but also where the solutions could be. But we're not asking them, because we have the same people who are getting in the conversation all the time. And that's a lot of what Fred was talking about yesterday, right?
Can I just comment though, because I'm the one who made a statement. I was complimenting Adam on his brilliance, because he was doing exactly what you're saying.
I agree.
He was getting the people in the frontline communities, not picking the usual environmental suspects. So I was just suggesting as a model, it's yet to be proved, but I think it's brilliant.
I agree with her.
Brilliant.
And I think as an environmental community, for those of us who are involved in this conversation, and this is sort of what I was talking about yesterday, that we got to bring some people into the conversation who are not the usual suspects. Because the honest truth is, some subset of us are in some room together on a fairly regular basis. Now, I might not be in a room with you, but the people who you are in a room with who are having these conversations, it's more or less the same people. It's the same people in Baltimore. It's the same people in Prince George's County, to an extent that there is a conversation going on in Prince George's County, and there is. But it's the same suspects. And we have all come together in this symposium, right? And we are the same usual suspects. So the challenge is, how do we bring other people whose voices are just as important, if not more so, than ours, to be in this circle, right? How do we expand the circle? We can't depend on other people to do it. We have to take the ownership to do it. And I think that's the challenge. That's one of the challenges. There's many challenges, but that's one of the challenges. How to expand
You
the
gave
circle.
Rebecca a lot to write.
Sorry, Rebecca, and talking at the speed of a New Yorker.
And I know she wants to go, but can I just say too, the language is issued and the history is issued, so that's why it's relevant, right? So you talked about Howard County. My family was the first black farming family in Western Howard County. We just had to sell the farm, right? Why? There was a waste management put on the thing. So if you look at Old Frederick in 99 to Nixon's farm, between my uncle and Mr. Nixon, every black family in that continuum was brought out there since 1940, right? The first thing they did is that along the stream, they put
social decline?
No, what do you call it? A dump.
A dump.
Right, which protected them for many years, right? But then when the land, so they rezoned the land, So now the taxes start to double or triple. This is high-end displacement. So when I hear Howard County, I'm not, but it's hard for me to reconcile that with my personal family. So we have to have history and culture and language in a way that doesn't make me trigger, because I just said, I just sold the property because of a history of things that, there was no boogeyman, but there's some structural things there that to this day remain unexamined. And we can't have a conversation where I trust you in coalition if we haven't talked about that.
Yeah, I think so. So one of the things, I know what I mentioned, but I think I mentioned it a couple times. Part of this DMV EJ coalition building, even for the folks who, been part of the coalition, and we've had some discussions, but again, we haven't gone as deep as I think we need to really put out all the cards on the table. And then for people, you're going to be uncomfortable. That's tension. But guess what? If you don't have the tension, it stays in the background and it builds up.
But there's tools and language for that.
I know,
that's what I'm saying.
Oh, no. What I'm saying is there's tools and, so ELP was one of the organizations that was mentioned in the report. They do a lot of training, similar to the people, not somewhat similar to the people to do, right? But my point instead of this is an important part of the discussion to figure out where we are. And I think one important point, and the faith-based piece was just an example, wasn't just trying to hone on the faith-based piece, but what came out of this discussion is, what Bernice said was a very important thing Fred said, is language. When you said it's language, right? People are doing the same thing. The way we express it, the way we talk about it is different. So understanding language and being able to language switch, code switch, be able to go back and forth. Some of us can do that, where it's not a problem. We can kind of communicate with one stakeholder group and communicate with another stakeholder group. Some of us cannot. We only end up communicating to our own stakeholder group. So that's where things get missed in translation, because we cannot, basically talk to different stakeholders because of the language.
But you also lose people, I think, too. This is one of the things that Bernice and I talk about often over the last probably 7 or 8 years when we've seen each other at various events and meetings, is that for folks that are on one side of the industry, it takes a strong personality to even put a toe in on the advocacy side, because you're still running the line between a client base and a professional service, and then bringing advocacy into a mainstream function. And so I'm able to do it because I have the personality for it. So when my boss is like, why are you going to that meeting? It has nothing to do with what we do. And I can say articulately, yes, it does.
You also have the EJ mandate too.
Exactly. And then I'm able to bring in all of the other stream of the services. The advocacy movement helps us in the work that we do, but everyone isn't so comfortable with that. I think, in getting back to your point about the mission and developing those tenets, I think it's important to make sure that there's a cross base of different folks that are coming to the table to move us forward in a way that the trajectory is set. You know what I mean? Where you're bringing in folks that can advocate on the advocate's behalf because they have partnerships and relationships in areas that they can't tap into. And then there are folks that are coming in from a legal perspective, and then there are folks that will stay on that advocacy line on the ground.
Well, so two quick things I'm calling you, Tommy. So the advocates who can, so most of the coalition are advocates who are nodes. They're, we're network weavers, we're nodes. We have the legal part. What we don't have is the community, the people who are actually should be served. So who are the folks we should be serving? Should also be the ones who are basically driving the process.
But they don't understand. So okay, so for instance, I spend most of my days now trying to talk about why we have to have a flush tax or a ring tax. People don't understand. All they understand is why I have to pay more. They don't understand that there's a consent decree. They don't understand, they don't understand the background elements of watershed health and quality, and the fact that most minorities live in areas where the water is degraded. You know what I mean? So it's the message. You have to create the message.
Oh yeah, no. I think it's a message. It's also like Miss Bundy and maybe Honeycutt, right?
Right.
What was said earlier. It's accessing us, because a lot of times we're not as accessible. So we have a lot of resource concentration, right? So we're not. So do we go to them or do they come to us? We've been trying to go to the people we serve, right? So getting back to your point about the hard work, that's part of the hard work, right? Is really engaging community in a way where we actually can really go and serve them and be available. So not necessarily being an expert on everything, but being available so you can provide that, you know, that assistance. I think that's a little different. Go ahead, Tommy.
Thanks. Yeah, I guess wanted to come back to a point about sort of the depth and the you know, institutional racism and a lot of the things that we don't necessarily have the space or I guess frankly the time to talk about at every meeting, but it's there all the time. And you talked about it building up if you don't actually express it.
Yeah, if you don't talk about it, it can build up and become a larger barrier.
Yeah.
And actually, it's a point of opportunity too.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I try to bring this up sometimes with, well, frankly, with my white colleagues sometimes, and, you know, I get responses like, oh, what's redlining? Or just things that, you know, I mean, you know, I didn't naturally know all these things. I've been trying to learn as much as I can. And I think that there are workshops and diversity training, not just diversity trainings, but racism trainings, and anti-racism trainings, that I guess part of me, every once in a while, I wonder if DMV Coalition can help educate white people.
So maybe we can bring in that can maybe be part of the mission is to help to undo racism and talk about structural racism, structural privilege.
Well, there's a function of power.
As a function.
If you build people's power authentically, they will show up. We're not trying to build people's power authentically.
Yeah,
yesterday in one of our breakout groups, we were having a conversation, and it was so sanitized because they didn't want to talk about race, and where it's so inextricably tied to everything. And I think in terms of building coalitions, our personal struggle in DC has been that environmentalism is quote unquote a white issue. And so you have a lot of black people who just don't want to be involved, period. You know, and so our approach, even though I don't think it's been terribly compelling, has been more clinical, and I think that's just a function of it being associated with the university and the resources we have access to. Not necessarily safe, but that's what's being funded. And that's another issue. But when you take it out to the community, even when you present empirical evidence, they don't get terribly compelled by much of anything because they still see the brands, they still see the name of the issue. And quite frankly, today was the first time I ever even heard about the 17 Principles of Environmental Justice. I'm like, wow, this could work.
Well, and again, going at that point, and again, I'm not going to keep beating myself about it, but go to the 17 Principles. So a lot of stuff that it may not connect. I Googled it while you were talking. Did you get it? Did you see how obvious it was? I'm so with you. So when everybody does that, even though this is maybe a new conversation for you, you will get it because everything we're talking about is already in the principles. And we don't refer back to the principles enough. And I'm sorry that I didn't help y'all with the grounding. I would help with the grounding in a better way, right?
But also, I'm also in ministry, and I kind of keep all that stuff compartmentalized. But again, it doesn't find its way into the church because the language and the methods of the church have been pretty much an individualistic gospel. And it doesn't equip people how to be in the world. It's just checking off a box, come feel good about yourself that you sat for 2 hours and moved on. And it's frustrating.
Well, it's not that case. I mean, it's not all the time, but
most of the time.
Sometimes
you look at the different types of gospels that are preached today, whether be it prosperity, be it just hit it and quit it.
Prosperity is the opposite of what we're talking about. It's the opposite of what we're talking about.
But it's very pervasive.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of there's a lot of cheap grace being sold out there, and there's a high demand for cheap grace. People want to come in, find out what is it going to take for me just to be palatable to God. They don't want a lot of responsibility. They don't really want to be changed. They don't really want to be challenged. They just want to feel good for a hot second and break out. And not have many consequences for having participated or being a member of a particular community of faith. And the communities of faith are complicit in promoting that because they just want to pay their bills, to tell you the truth. It's a business.
This made me sad saying all that.
You said I spent money on seminary and then I come to this conclusion and I'm like, wow, what did I just buy?
Let me get some new hands.
So, I guess.
What's your name and who? Who you with, Nick?
My name is Gagan Singh, and I'm with the Baltimore Energy Challenge. My colleagues and I are all with the Baltimore Energy Challenge, and I feel like, just based on what I've heard so far, I guess this is not necessarily as much of a question and just comment based on like what I've heard so far. I think it's really interesting. We go, like, for the Baltimore Energy Challenge, we go to a lot of churches, we do a lot of presentations all over Baltimore City, in low-income neighborhoods, I guess higher-income neighborhoods as well. And I feel like the main thing that I've noticed is that there's a lack of connection. So essentially what we do is we teach folks about ways to reduce energy in their homes. And I've noticed that it's really unfortunate, but depending on which neighborhood you're going into, you kind of have to like cater the discussion to that neighborhood. So if I'm going into a certain neighborhood, I know that I have to talk about the environmental benefits to lowering energy in your homes. But if I'm going into another neighborhood, then I have to talk about the economic benefits. But then I've also realized that it's not like the people that are living in the lower income neighborhoods can't understand the environmental benefits. So I don't know if, I feel like maybe it's all about like bringing things together or trying to not exclude people from the conversation.
Well, I think you make a really good point, but I think it's the point about you do what you know, and you got to know what you don't know, but also their lenses. So you recognize their lens and use the language for the lens. You use the language for the perspective, right? But the point we've been trying to make about EJ is, if you again go to the 17 principles. Even if you don't say 17, let me call it 17 principles of environmental justice. Say we got rid of the 17 principles of environmental justice. Say the 17 principles of environmental stewardship, right? That would probably change. That's another change in the language. You will see everything is already there. It's very holistic. Ecological, energy efficiency, resources, sustainability, it's all there. But I think when people hear 17 principles of environmental justice, they automatically, we go into a box.
Get radical.
They get, marginalized, we compartmentalize it, because we have assumptions. But those principles are really core driver and really have everything that we need. It's just we need to change them from the 17 principles of environmental justice, 17 principles to environmental sustainability or stewardship or something else.
And there's a lot of science on brain narratives and the effect on the brain and how we message, right? That's storytelling matters. And part of the disconnect, right, is, and it's just, if it's food justice, right, I didn't know about the 17 principles, but here, this goes back to King, right? And what will happen is somebody will helicopter in, and Columbus, and it's no offense, right?
You call it Columbus?
It gets Columbus as if it didn't start communities of color. And so you wonder why people aren't connected, but you haven't framed it like this is your legacy. You started this. We're not teaching you, and you were the backbone of
faith-based groups drove this.
Right, but my point is that they're not.
17 principles.
The frame is not.
Well, I've been going to church all my life and never heard of it.
Well, they sponsored a meeting that 700 of us came to, and we wrote it.
And you wrote it, I know. Bernice was there.
Yeah.
Bernice actually was there, so. So another new hand. Anybody? But you did have another comment?
Oh, no. I was just thinking, it's just something that I wanted to share. And also, I don't know if it's something that I've been trying to figure out how to deal with. Like, you're not necessarily trying to make assumptions about a neighborhood, but then you're also that's been a personal challenge, but trying to connect people to the work that we're doing and show that it is all, whether it is a faith-based community or whether it is a particular neighborhood in the city, trying to teach people that this is relevant.
Well, you got to remember, you got to know your customer. Right. You got to cater your message to your customer.
And you also can't feel bad about having the judgment, okay? Because I am Black, as you can see. I am a woman. I work in a variety of communities, and where I have the most challenge explaining and addressing environmental justice issues is in Black communities. Yeah. And so that's inherent to this work. Okay, so you cannot carry that burden with you. What you have to do is to do your best to communicate the messages and bring them along with you. Does that make sense? And I think if you do it in a way where they can see that you are genuinely trying to help improve their lives or expand the platform of information and engagement, I think people can see that at the core. Do you understand what I'm saying? And I have that same challenge.
Let me go to Nellie real quick. You wanted to say something. I want to get more younger folks. I mean, you're younger than me, so young folks. Go ahead.
what regards to?
You about to, I saw you had that look. You were raising your hand. Go
I
ahead.
try to look all day.
Oh. Well, you need to be called upon, then you got to look all day. Go ahead.
So I think it's just about knowing your audience and catering, not going in and just being egocentric. It's kind of the whole idea of America. We do it internationally too. So bringing that idea that we can't just go in and tell somebody how it should be. We need to start building from the people. And I know you guys all know this, so I don't know what else to add.
So what it was said earlier in the session about the faith-based session, greed, pride, and apathy. That's pride. I know how to see. I can see. You know, I know what I'm doing. No, as a PhD, maybe I don't act like it for those who know me. I know that I know nothing. I'm a vessel of information. Either it's useful or useless. And most of it's useless. It's only good for Jeopardy. That's what I realized. Okay.
People only sustain what they care about. People only sustain what they're invested in. So if you don't get the community to invest in what their future will look like.
But you have to have an investment in what they're interested in. So
it needs to be their investment.
Their interest. So you've heard throughout the symposium, a lot of us are saying we want diversity so we can get them to do this. No, you have to get them to invest in what they're interested in and have it connect to your goals. So community engagement around these issues are not about what you're trying to do, at least to me, because again, as I said before several times, that your issue may be coordinary or whatever to them. You got to make your stuff connect to what's primary and secondary to them and make it holistic where it can get buy-in, which will lead to benefits for your issue, and then potentially they will expand what they do to conclude what you do. But you can't start with what you're interested in.
Right.
That's not how the world works. That's not how you're going to work in community. I mean, you heard Ms. Honeycutt, Ms. Bundy. Their issues are very powerful, very important issues. You may have something that's totally important, but for them, that's what they see. That's what they know. That's what they live.
That's their trauma and their healing.
Yeah, so a lot of, and actually that's a really good point. So a lot of what we're trying to do with environmental justice and making it positive, you're trying to overcome trauma, historical trauma, long-term trauma, deal with pain. But remember, the EJ movement is a powerful movement. It's a movement of faith. So that's the positive pieces, right? But you're trying to overcome intergenerational long-term trauma that communities have dealt with. So you come in and saying, we want you to do this particular issue when it is important, but this trauma is what's part of me and part of my community. I'm trying to address the trauma, right? So you can help me address that trauma. I can then start thinking, okay, I got you. Now I have time to connect this issue to what you're interested in.
And we need a dialogue.
You have to have a dialogue. You have to be open to it. You have to be open to it. And like you said, you got to go in, like y'all done, go in understanding that the issues that are relevant to you, you got to connect them to their issues. So a lot of folks, like, you know, low income, I want to save money. You talk about green infrastructure. You put green roofs, green walls on, you're going to save money. Shit ain't cool. I need food for my family. Okay, we can have urban gardens. Do it. I live in a food desk. I'm living with food apartheid. You know, so you got to connect your energy piece to the food issue. Connect your energy piece to, you know, weatherization. What's important, and then you'll still achieve your goals, but you'll help them fulfill what they've been trying to do. Yes, and I'm going to go to another young fellow. Let me come to you, Mike.
I just came, I was invited by Ms. Brown, so I just showed up. I'm not a part of anything. But I think my big question just is, where do the children from the community play a part in this? Because really, they're the ones who are really going to pass the torch on. And I think that, you know, we're dealing with a lot of people, like you said, trauma, you know, you realize the world for what it is, you have this worry and that worry. And sometimes as children, you know, the smaller things are the things that they're more concerned about. So how do you intermingle that into their lives when their parents, you know, we may miss that generation a little bit, but we can really start at the bottom with the children more. How do you integrate that?
I mean, I think it's a really good point. I think as part of the coalition, we haven't really addressed that youth pipeline development component specifically, but there are organizations that we are affiliated with that do have youth components where they're engaging youth, educating youth. I think the Earth Conservation Corps is one of those groups, correct? You have other groups that do that. So you're getting them to kind of get interested in the environment, and then you connect that interest when they get invested into the larger issue. So what you're trying to do is give them exposure to make it relevant, right? Exposure and relevance is what's important for you. In addition, getting your point about, you know, the next generation, I mentioned yesterday, there are programs that have been put in place that are called ECO program, Environmental Careers Organization. I was an ECO intern. I have colleagues right now in the EPA who were ECO interns. One is now the Associate Director of Office of Environmental Justice. We all came to the same program. That's 20 years in the making. It was in the program in 1995. This is 20, so, no, 1995, so 20 years later. So it's 20 years later for me. Okay, almost, yeah. Thank you.
The Children Nature Network have a fellowship too.
And I think that's a good point. I was a TA here when I was in grad school, and I taught environmental ethics to seniors graduating from the University of Maryland, and I was coming from a public health perspective. Not a single one of my seniors in that class had ever heard of the Tuskegee syphilis study. Ever. And I said, if you want to go into communities and take soil samples, and you're going to wonder why people are skeptical of you coming in and pulling a Columbus, right?
I might use that, pull a Columbus.
I'm going to use it all the time. But that's why. And we're sending we're sending people who are trained in ecology and trained in environmental science out into the world without any historical context whatsoever. And they wonder why they're not allowed, they are not embraced into communities. And so I think education, there's a lot to that. And we talk about youth development pipelines, and it's important. It's important for communities of color, and it's important for white students as well, because white students today don't see race in the same way that other generations did. And it's important to train people in environmental science about the historical context in which they are working, and why the structures exist, and why then they go to college and they meet the kids with penny loafers and daddy's credit card, they can get a good job, and why is that?
That's an interesting comment. I want to get to, I know you have a comment about saying race differently, because race, for a lot of people, race is not an issue. That's a good thing, but they're not understanding the historical reasons why race is still a problem.
It still exists, right?
It still
why
exists.
the structure is
so you got it you have some. It's a generational thing. So yes, sir. Go ahead.
So John, I'm from the Baltimore Challenge as well, and I guess this is kind of related to that. We've talked a lot about helicoptering in the community, pulling in Columbus, and we've also talked about reframing a message that fits the community. And I guess my problem is, from my perspective, being a person of privilege, I don't entirely understand the needs of any particular community that is part of my own. And so my concern is going into community and reframing my message, but should I be revising my message actually? Am I actually pushing a solution that I think is correct, that isn't necessarily the most important thing?
Can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Just don't be long. I'm not
going to be long.
Go ahead.
I'm going to say this. I grew up in Columbia, Maryland. I do not carry my privilege with me, okay? And so you have to make sure you adjust your lens. So where you center yourself in, you're a human being, okay? There are things that are important to you in your world. It doesn't matter what demographic that house was, or the car that you drive, or what you have been given. At its core, you are a human being. You want to live in a clean environment, and so that's where you pull your strength from. Don't focus or try to discount how you were brought into this world. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so your lens, your perspective is important. Right. It's part of the story, because like I said before, human unity. And that's not. I think some of the big Catholic churches have some website called human unity. They're trying to just move into first to understand how we unify. And so your perspective is important, but it's very important for you to understand. Just understand where you're coming from, but then be open to the other perspectives and interests. Right.
And find the commonality.
And find commonality.
Lead with.
Yeah. So when you leave your privilege, or I leave my PhD behind, I bring in information and knowledge, but also I'm a resource. Other than that, I let it flow from the community. Right, and try to be responsive.
But that's not to say that if you know better, you do better.
Yeah.
And there is training. This is extraordinarily complex stuff, right?
Yeah.
I'm doing a national cohort for 3 years in racial equity healing, and really accomplished people, and not everybody's on the same page.
Yeah.
So, you know, your language can change as you get new information and you get right, and so that's important too. Right?
And the lens also changes based upon where you work. I don't just work in Maryland. The majority of my EJ work is done with poor white folks. And they can't stand to see me coming until they understand why I'm there, and then they get it.
Yeah.
So
no, you have to remember, you have to be able to work with different groups. Doing work in fracking, I was part of that group that did the public health report in Western Maryland. That's a totally different demographic than a lot of Baltimore State, right? Somerset County, Sussex, Delaware. Very different demographic in many ways in parts of the state. So probably white, rural, right? White, rural. But you have to be able to work, be open to and dialogue with different groups and understand what's important to them. And many things, like you said, was important to them. In family, health, environment. And, well, you know, a lot of people, faith, family, health, and environment, right? So you have to understand what's important to them and where you have commonalities. And from there, that's how you build a relationship. And you can be really engaging with that group and be able to provide help with their issues, right? Let me go to Mike first, and I come.
Okay. Circling way back to the principles of environmental justice.
Yeah, go ahead.
And thank you, Bernice, for being there in '91, helping write those. I run into a lot of forums as well, where it's like there are environmental justice forums, and people are like, I never saw the principles until now, and hearing that again today is just, it's a little shocking, I guess, given that this is an environmental justice event. And I think we need to make it easier for people to see those.
We need to put them on our website. I mean, I know everybody doesn't have access, but I think we just need to put them on the website. Again, I had assumptions.
Me too.
Not an assumption that everybody was exposed to them, but just assumptions that had some familiarity, even if they haven't seen them in a while. You know, some folks have never even seen them before. Yeah. And that's why I dropped the ball on that. So I'm gonna do better just to start us out with anchoring. You know.
Okay, and nothing directed at you on that.
Yeah. I hit myself.
Just there are other principles as well, like the principles of working together that came out of the second People Power Environmental Leadership Summit, which I did get to attend in 2002 here in DC. So there's a lot of powerful stuff in there, and in the HMS principles that are increasingly being dusted off and used by other groups as guidance in how to work with other. Can you
describe those principles for folks real quick?
I don't want to try to do justice to them.
Okay.
A short description off of my memory. I know the EJ principles better than the other ones. But if folks want to find them, I can make it easy. Google environmental racism. The first link after Wikipedia is one of my pages that has all the documents there. All the principles are right there at the top. So I think it's important, though, to make sure that we're not repeating EPA's definition of environmental justice, which is rooted in the reaction to the charges of environmental racism. And it's the environmental equity definition. It was the poison people equally definition.
We want everybody to be poisoned equally, which is not what environmental justice is. Exactly. We don't want everybody to be poisoned equally. We want to reduce, you know, we want to, you know, really protect Mother Nature, protect Earth, you know, and be well connected to each other.
Right. There's nothing in the EJ principles to say, spread the poison around better or cool with it. It's way more radical than that. Yeah. And to understand that and inform our work so that we're not pushing so-called EJ policies that are weak efforts at redistribution rather than things that get to the core. Yeah. And that's just so important.
Okay. I know we're all off of what I was trying to do, and I gave y'all stickies. So before, because I'm not being a great moderator, before we run out of time, please use your sticky to write 2 things. Issues that we should address, whether it be a specific media-related, chemical, facility-related issue, or an issue that ends up being a challenge. So if you didn't pass your sticky down, I hope you have a partner. I think I gave enough to everybody. So an issue we should address, and it can be also a challenge for us to, you know, think about as we build this coalition. Okay, so at least I'll get that. So issue that we need to address could be a media-related, chemical, facility. What's a major? It could be energy, it could be climate, or it could be a challenge. Why has it been difficult for us to build a coalition? What are some of the challenges of doing that? Okay, so at least we would have that to report back to the group as we kind of take this next step. Because the coalition, like I said, we're a loose organization right now, but we really need more structure. We need more embeddedness in the principles, right? And so we need to review the principles. We have to review the principles ourselves. Not as a single meeting. We can even start a conference call with at least one principle and talk about it.
And I'd like to know the history, since you have so many there.
Yeah, let me go Ms. Bundy. Ms. Bundy first. Yeah.
I don't mean that.
But again, your issue and challenge, and then I'm gonna pass out. Rebecca, you want to pass out the other set, And once you put down resources and opportunities.
Am I passing it?
The stickies. There's another color.
Okay.
You see it? Oh, it's in my pocket.
So no, I don't see it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You got it? You don't need it there?
Yes. Okay. And so Miss Bundy.
Yeah, what's your name?
John.
John, okay. So, only thing, I had a couple of things, and the first thing I wanted to say was, I wanted to say to John, don't apologize for being a person of privilege, because it's not like putting a nail in your hand, because that's what your background is. The more important thing is that, because you are a person of privilege or whatever, you've had a better quality of life. So you can look at the people who have a lesser quality of life, and you can probably educate them or try to help them on learning how to better improve their quality of life. I want to commend all of you for coming from Baltimore and what you said you were doing in terms of like, I really like the way she explained when they go to African American homes and they're telling people how to improve the use of their environment and how to help the importance. What some people don't understand is, and she talked about kids. If you start talking to kids, you start, like the Bible tells you, train a kid in the way they will go. If you start telling kids little, it's wrong to throw trash into your neighborhood. It's wrong to throw trash into the street, okay? Then you start training them then. Like it says, train them up from being little into what they should be, productive citizens. You start talking about church. Just to talk on church real quick. Stewardship, training, evangelism, and mission. This whole environmental justice thing falls right into interfaith community. Because as stewards, we are all responsible for maintaining the earth. Training, we should all be trying to train each other on something that we have learned from here today. I've learned what are the 17 principles. I don't even know what that is. It just wrote it down. So I can Google it and learn it. But we all have come to this 2-day workshop and learned something that we can take back to our communities. For you and your PhD, and for this lady right here, for myself and Ms. Honeycutt, we are more like boots on the ground. That's who we are. We need to have interaction with people like you and your credentials and your methodologies and your education, because education is empowerment. And we can connect with people like you. We can learn how we can go back to our community and we can better use your resources, or have you come talk to our citizens and tell us, hey, this is what you need to do. This is how you mobilize. You know, you write a petition. After you write a petition, you get all your neighbors to come down to city council and come to your council person and tell them this is why this is important. You know, so that's what I was trying to say, stewardship, training, evangelism, and mission. And the mission is for all of us to try to make this environment better for those who are coming, that are living now, but for all those who are coming behind us, so that our mission overall will be to make this a better earth. So we will not have styrofoam that is outliving us when we're dead and gone. And styrofoam is buried in the ground. So, you know, we will have a better environment in which to leave to our children. So they'll have a healthier environment.
Thank you. So that help is important. And I'm glad. What's your name again? I know it's
John.
John. So you say you're a person of privilege. I'm also a person of privilege. I'm an academic. I have a PhD. So when I didn't say this, maybe I said this a different way, I understand that I have a footprint too. And when I go, and I think I mentioned this earlier, when I go do my work in communities, Somerset, you know, Sussex, Dundalk, Baltimore City, we have a mosquito project in West Baltimore. We're trying to help out the folks in Curtis Bay, right? Stuff in DC and Ivy City, dealing with the tour bus issue. You know, all this stuff we're working on. I have privilege. And so when I do all that work I'm committed to, I still able to go home, which doesn't have most of those issues, as I said before, right? So I recognize that. And so you have to recognize the privilege you have, and that privilege provides opportunities for you to really be a resource. So that's the way to look at it. You are a resource. Okay? For the other color, it was supposed to be resources, bigger resources, that we can leverage the access for this coalition, and also what are some of the opportunities that we should think about? Opportunities to work with other groups, other partners that are engaged. So that's the what color is that? Peach? No, the orange.
Orangey one.
The yeah. Oh, this is peach. Okay, so the gold. I'm sorry.
Saffron.
I don't have my glasses.
That's salmon and peach.
Okay. Okay, peach. I'm sorry. This is peach. This is salmon. The gold. I cannot see.
Even a point.
Yeah. So gold, resources and opportunities. So resources could be grants, resources could be conferences, resources could be opportunities could be partners. You know, things coming up. So that's what you want. You know, we don't just want to talk about the negative stuff. We want to talk about how can we really address this what can we access more as a coalition. Okay. Let's see where we're going on time.
If anyone here wants to get more directly involved, like anyone after the whole event, have you already made an announcement about like, hey, if you want to, everyone will get on the email list, right? But
yeah, we're going to send some additional, yeah, we need to kind of process all the stuff that we're gathering. We're going to send some additional emails for people who want to be engaged as part of the coalition. Here's how to join the list. And also, as I said earlier, we have an opportunity to do a much better job of using the seed space. Remember the 2012, I think Mike and Bernice and some others were there. We have this online space for people to create affinity groups. So you can connect community members to someone maybe a technical expert, and you can build that relationship and partnership, and they can provide technical assistance. But for the work, you have to use it. We can provide the space, but you have to take upon yourself to use the space, right?
Online, is that?
It's an online space, which can lead to in-person engagement. But when you're not doing in-person engagement, you can use that online space if you use online resources. That's a potential problem. Go ahead.
You just said something that set off a trigger for me. My personal background is in health policy, and when the Affordable Care Act was passed, they funded an office of faith-based partnerships within HHS. So we may want to look at pursuing an office of faith-based partnerships. It's on here.
Okay, cool.
Within like whatever your agency is, EPA.
Well, I'm here to University of Maryland.
No, I was saying whatever the environmental agency. So yeah, or somewhere.
Yeah.
You know, there's always money to do something, and if you can get somebody to just stick it within the bill, then there you go.
And I think that's a really good point about getting back to the issue of, so we talked about power, right? We talked about access and resources, right? So
educating funders.
Educating the funders. So we have a funding mechanism, but we also have to educate the funders so they can provide funding for the people who receive funding. And get back to Fred's point again. And he makes a really good point.
Because even within the White House, they have a White House office of faith-based partnerships.
Yeah.
And so some of the federal agencies have them, some of them don't.
Yeah.
And I've never heard of it because I've not really been involved in environmentalism, but it's something worth pursuing.
Okay, that's right.
Just to repeat what I said to you after the last session before lunch, and you mentioned that the funders, have not shown up. So they're not here to see what's going on.
Yeah.
A really well built out website that shows the results, the content of this event, preserves the institutional memory from the event, and is also something you can show the funders.
We have a space. So our Siege website has a lot of our stuff that we've been doing, but what we need to use that symposium space and build up the pages.
Right.
Put the videos, put the sessions. I think I don't know if the dude came in and actually recorded it.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's a staff issue.
Did you know people from Town Creek and Campbell were here? Did you?
Yeah, I know some of the, but not all the funders were here, and then I don't think a lot of people here today. But also, when we talked to the Town Creek folks, the idea, we're talking to Stuart, was we want to have a follow-up with a lot of the Baltimore area grantmakers and the environmental grantmakers group, so they can hear about this event, get the report, and then really get to the issue of how you're going to provide more funding to community groups for capacity building, and also provide more funding that's really more focused on some of these issues that we're talking about. It's more of this integration, ecological and human. Okay, Bernice?
So I think we need to meet more often. We don't need to meet at this level. We can only do this once a year, and before everybody goes to Kobe, we just need to thank you and your really ginormous staff of people for all the effort.
We have the opposite a lot of staff. We got basically one staff.
But we need to. So I don't know about the rest of you all, but I don't. For some reason, I don't remember the climate convening. But it was a gathering. I feel like I was there, but I don't exactly remember it.
And we didn't have the same type of management of it as we did with this. There wasn't any video from that one.
But one thing I do remember from the first gathering, and I felt it certainly in this gathering yesterday, that it's clear that people want to come together. Because this is the only opportunity that we all have to see each other over the course of the year sometimes. And I think it's just, a positive self-reaffirmation when we can get together and share strategies and tactics, but also fellowship, right? And relationship building. And that relationship building, so he asked, what happened historically, in a nutshell. There were people all over the country who were working on these issues in communities all over the country. And the United Church of Christ Commission for Racial Justice put out the call to have a gathering where we would all come together to talk about these issues and lay out a strategy, a framework for how we were going to advance this agenda going forward. And 700 people showed up at the Washington Court Hotel in Washington, D.C. And we went through just a myriad of workshops, too many freaking workshops, and, workshops, sessions, plenaries. Then we would have cultural events from those of you who are from D.C., Donald Smith, the great and late Donald Smith was one of the organizers of the first People of Color Summit. And Donald always made sure that we had a cultural activity. After we did all of that and we met and blah, 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 and at 9, 10 o'clock at night, we would come together, and there was a drafting group of which I was a part of that were working constantly on these principles of environmental justice. And we would bring them forward to a draft every night to 700 people, and they would debate every word that was in those principles. And it was the most, for me, it was the most empowering expression of democracy that I have ever been a part of, to watch people really go back and forth with each other about what they wanted to put down as the foundational document, that this is what environmental justice means and this is what it looks like. And so we came up with these 17 principles, people voted on them, we wordsmithed it to death, back and forth, over a 4-day period, and at the end of the conference we voted on whether or not we wanted that to be the expression of what we meant by the articulation of environmental justice. And so that's what the principles of environmental justice are. There's also a preamble to it. Yeah. There's also another document that talks about how we intended to use them and build this movement. So there was a lot of intentionality, right? That people knew that they were building a social movement and what is the path and the trajectory that they wanted to be on. And so my only, takeaway from that, sort of bringing it to this conversation, is there was an intentionality of why we were coming together and what it is we were trying to do, right? And here we are 24 years later. That was 1990, October of 1990. And people have been organizing before that and have been organizing since then, but it was a direct connection between organizing, policy, science, advocacy, even an electoral campaign for those people who really needed to get somebody into office in their local situation to change conditions. A challenge to, people had to go back home and be engaged in every mode of civic advocacy to move this agenda. So it was a big, really big, giant agenda that has sort of worked itself through in many places, but that doesn't mean that people are not still in struggle and people are not still suffering. So, what do we do in the 21st century to update what we laid forward as the agenda towards the end of the 20th century? How do we bring that forward, and how do we grow the circle, right? Because for me, this is not enough people doing it. It's some great and fabulous people doing this work, but not enough people doing this work.
So how are we on time?
We're, according to the schedule, we're supposed to be done right now.
Done right now?
Yes,
3 o'clock.
3 o'clock.
Okay, well, thank you for I know we didn't get through the full discussion, but like Bernice said, this is not just an annual meeting. We do have, we're trying to do bi-monthly calls for the DMV Evening Coalition. We haven't stuck to that, and then we have some quarterly or more frequent in-person meetings going into the community. So we have to do a better job. A part of it is the resources. That's it. So the resources are part of the problem that drives it, but we want to work that in and do a better job. And so thank you for your contributions today. This will be part of a report for this session with these the sticky notes. So if you can get the sticky notes back to Rebecca, please, that'd be really great. And then also that at the end of, if you go to another workshop, if you're leaving now, please complete your evaluations. If you're going to leave for the day, thank you for being for the last 2 days. If you're going to stay for the second workshop, complete your evaluations then and just hand them in to the moderator for that session. Okay.